Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Savvius webinar. Today's topic is going to be on getting started with Savvius Omnipeek. So today's presenter, we have with us Chuck Gray. He is a systems engineer here at Savvius, and he's going to take you through the ins and outs of Omnipeek. Chuck, I'll go ahead and toss it to you.
Great. Welcome, everybody, to getting started with Savvius Omnipeek. Hopefully you've had a chance to download a trial of Omnipeek. That's what you see running on my screen right now. I'm running it on just a simple Windows laptop. When you first open it up, you'll get a screen similar to this, and on the initial time you load, you'll get the yellow box here that tells you welcome to Omnipeek, and it gives you information about what the latest improvements to Omnipeek are. In this case, our most recent improvements have included increasing the speed of our Omni appliances, and that includes the forensic search speed. So if you go to look up data that has been stored on those remote capture and analysis devices, it'll be quicker than ever. We've also improved our voice over IP reporting and some additional network and application latency information, as well as enhancing our real-time protocol graph displays and the VoIP reports and screens. And we have some support for NetFlow, and in the VoIP we've also added the dial tones that you can hear when you do the playback. And as always, we keep up with adding additional decoders. You can always get a complete list even after this box goes away on repeated launchings by going down to the body and doing the view README, and that will open up the full README for what's new and everything else that's going on with Omnipeek. So when you do have this, of course, you open it up, we're on the start page. You'll hear me refer to that as a home page as well. It'll have a list of recent files that you've opened, and you can also save captures as templates, so you can easily access that quickly as well if you need to launch a new template. And we'll go into some of these details and examples as we go through this. More importantly, down here is to get started with is that documentation, and the Getting Started guide is a really great place to get oriented to how to use Omnipeek to its fullest potential. And when you click on that, it'll take you to an interactive set of links, and you can just jump to the area of interest for you to get some brief information to get you started. As you navigate through here, you can get back to that home or start page by simply going up to the icons. And as you notice, these different icons do pop up, just like many Windows programs, some helpful hints of what they'll do for you. So I encourage you to take the time to go through the program and always take a look at what's available to you on the various screens. In addition to the Getting Started guide, we do have the full User's Guide, and that is a full PDF version of the User's Guide. And I will tell you in here, having the sidebar for all the table of contents is helpful, but what I often use is the Control F find feature to look for a given topic very quickly, and that'll allow you to jump through and get to the detailed information you need to know as you're going through navigating the program. In addition, you'll see that there's view driver installation instructions. That's actually used if you're going to leverage the Wi-Fi capabilities. And that's if you're using Omnipeek Pro or Omnipeek Enterprise, and you have a compatible USB Wi-Fi adapter that has the drivers available to be put in promiscuous mode. And we have some other webinars available that get into the details of using that. But very quickly, if you think you have a chipset in your own USB adapters that enable the wireless, you can look here for instructions on how to leverage that for your captures. Savvius also does sell USB adapters, 802.11ac compatible. We also have additional resources that will show you, for example, sample files to help you get through and understand how different features can work, and that way you have some example captures to work with, and we'll look at a couple of those later on as well. Now, to get started with, we do have the ability, as I said, to do a new capture file, open captures, and view captures, but I'm going to go ahead and pull from our recent file list one of the ones we use for training. And that'll have a lot of examples that we can go over. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that recent files, and it's going to open up our workshop file. And this one, as you can see, is going to take a moment to load as it, in this upper overview panel, it shows us that we're loading 253,000 packets, and that's going to show us the time frame that it spans, which runs from 1344 to 1349, so just about 5 minutes worth of capture for that 250,000 packets. And as you see, when I hover over various portions of the timeline graph, it gives me the information for the section I'm looking at. Throughout the program, there's many places where you can just click and drag to focus the data. And as you see, as I select that dip there, it shows me that information updated down in the bottom dashboard. And throughout the program, as you have the overview and you're looking at different dashboards and such, this is a great way to focus down on the information. You can see that as I move the mouse, it does give me different indicators, so I can go ahead and hover over the edge and use a double arrow and be able to resize that capture area. When it turns to a hand, I can click and drag to refocus the area that I'm looking at. If I want to get back to the full view, I can either hit escape, or throughout the program, when you right-click, there's many context-sensitive menus. And in this case, I'm going to select clear selection to get the full overview. And as I was going through that, it did update these details to the left that shows me the number of flows being viewed, the number of files that were transferred, the expert events we've seen, as well as the number of applications, IP addresses, and the country we've touched on. You may notice there's these dots along the bottom. Those indicates when events were occurring throughout the time of capture, so you could always focus on those areas of events as well. Now on to the left-hand side where it shows the analysis views that we have. The top section is our dashboards, which give you a quick at-a-glance view of the data that you're looking at. And in this case, we're taking a look at the network-centric focus. That shows us our network utilization over a 10-minute view. You'll notice we have a little drop-down. I encourage you to take a look at those, as you can change the way the view looks to suit your needs. If you like column view instead, you can easily switch it over to that. You can also see we have our current activity. So if this were a live capture, this would be ticking by and scrolling along, and these numbers would be updating as we go through it. So our current activity would always give you a clue of what's going on right now. And if you like a gauge view better, you can certainly do that. Over on the right-hand side, we do show the count of our expert events for the different levels of, informational severity, warning severity, high-level type of events. We also show you the top talkers, and that can be by IP address, by physical address, by IP version 6, or even by country if you'd like. And of course, we show our top protocols and top applications, so you can get that view however you wish. So all these different panels will have multiple ways of displaying it, and I encourage you to play around with these different views to find the ones that suit your needs the best. In the applications view, we do, of course, show, once again, those top applications by flows, top application by bytes, by categories even, so that we have an idea of what type of utilization is going on, and once again, a number of different ways to view those things. These can be a little more interactive, so when we're looking at things like the utilization, if I want to focus in on how much HTTP traffic I have, a click on the legend at HTTP then shows me how that compares to the overall a little more clearly, and clicking it again, it can turn that off. And the same thing can be done with the application response time as you focus in on that information. If you have the voice and video traffic in your network, we have enhanced this. Once again, if this was a live capture, these call counters and statistics would be updating in real time along with the call quality distribution. And that way, as time goes by, it'll show you the number of open calls, the quality of calls as it's going on live. And we've added a new panel that allows you to see that call quality over time. So perhaps makes it easier to correlate when there's heavier network utilization, does the corresponding bad call count go up at that time. You can also take a look at the different codecs that are in your environment. For example, if you need to focus on one that looks like it's being a big area of focus as problems happen, you can click on that, and you can focus on the G711 ALAW codec and do your research on that to find out why that may be having issues. And then, of course, we have also the call volumes by codec as well, so you can focus in on that. Now, one of our best views that I like is our compass view, because this dashboard is much more interactive, and I usually customize this one for a little clearer view. I like to see the area chart, because then when I'm selecting things from the bottom, for example, if I wanted to see that HTTP, it is a little bit clearer for me to see that. When I hover over it, it does give me the good information that I'm looking for. I can also customize which type of view I have, as I can with many others. If I'm interested in flow information as well, I can pop up a panel by clicking on the button at the bottom, and I can then unpin it if I wish just by clicking in the corner here. I can resize these panels just by grabbing a border and dragging them so I can get a little better view of what's going on. And it gives me a wealth of information. If I had wireless information, there'd be additional wireless buttons down here as well for me to work with. Now, this Compass dashboard is very handy in that initially it starts off by showing us the average megabits per second, but it does give us, different ways to see. If I can see what I'm maxing out at traffic-wise throughout the course of the capture time, I can switch over to that. I can switch over the, speed that I'm looking at to gigabits instead of megabits, for example, or if I need to, I can take a look at the packet counts or the two-way latencies, response times information when I have such things up. There's all these buttons along the top. I encourage you to take a look at those, but I can take a look at the inbound and outbound separately by clicking on that, and that'll vary on the different views how the effect will look when you click on it. So down here, you'll notice it switches to bytes in and bytes out, so it gives you a little more granular view. You can also switch over the filtering, whether it's logical and or. One of the handy things is you can show the legend for what you're looking at. So for example, if I come in here and I select that HTTP, it overlays there and it shows me some counts a little more clearly, and I can also turn off this portion to focus in on just that HTTP traffic. And throughout the program, one of our workflows, in fact one of the primary ones, is you start with your overall data and then you narrow down to data of interest, and then you can right-click, and with the context-sensitive menu, you're often going to find select related packets. And when I do that, you'll see that I'm down to only 2,000 packets instead of over 25 or 250,000 packets, and it allows me either to highlight those of interest, hide the ones that aren't of interest, copy them to a window, so I can work with things that way. And I'll be showing you an example of that in a workflow. But just keep in mind, that's typically the way you work through the program is kind of like searching through a needle in the haystack. And you're going to go ahead and remove all that extra hay so you can just get down to the needle of interest. And you can always add some more hay back in to get some context information around that. Now, just like on the other view, you can click and drag here as well and focus in all the data on that. And we have this little double-headed arrow here to switch that back to select all. We do have an additional view, much like the legend, that's going to show our expert events. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the legend for a moment so we can see this a little more clearly. But the expert events are based on our over 25 years worth of expertise in doing packet level analysis. So you can quickly use our expertise to determine where you're having given issues throughout the course of your capture, and that can make it very easy to quickly narrow down, the area of interest you're looking for, and be able to zoom right in and get to the packets and understand what the issues are that are going on. I'm going to go ahead and clear that out, and you could also come in here and uncheck things just with a quick right click. So if you have gone through and you've checked a bunch of things, a quick right click and uncheck will get you back to the overall view. Moving on, we do have the different capture related analytics. So a lot of people doing network analysis and doing packet level inspection are used to this type of view, which gives you that every bit of every packet detail of information. Nice thing is when you click on these, just like many of those programs, of course you get your breakdown with additional information often involved from us that lets you know what's going on in the different fields of the packet, as well as the different decodes that are available as you're looking at the data. The nice thing is, throughout the program, you can right-click on the column headers, and it'll give you a wealth of additional information you can pull up to customize this information. So, for example, one of the helpful ones is a size bar, so you can see how the protocol encapsulation looks throughout the different packets that you're looking at. If you're interested in very specific information as you're scrolling through that and you didn't see it on the right-click list, we do have dynamic decode fields. And what that means is, for example, if I'm interested in the TCP flags that are set, I can right-click on this and I can add it as a decode column. And as I come up here and slide over, I can then see how those TCP flags are. I'm going to go ahead and move this over a little bit and resize it. As you can see, easy to handle that. And then as I go through, I can see all those TCP flags as appropriate for each of the packets that contain that information. And one of our latest innovations is you don't have to just have one of those. If you have many different fields that you want to take a look at, like perhaps you want to see the window size as well, you can add multiple decode columns to really get this set up the way you want to see it. And of course, if you need to disable those, a right click and you can come down and turn those back off quite easily. As you're viewing these screens, you can turn on and off the different view panels. So that's easy enough to do. And you can toggle the orientation as well, so it's stacked instead of side by side, and have many different options to do things. In addition to very easily building filters, if you need, simply right-click on a field, tell it make a filter, and it'll bring you to the interactive field saying, hey, I wanted to see the TCP window, and you could filter on that by a given value, which when applied, which you can do right up here from the filter bar, click down, and you could say insert filter, pick from one of our pre-built ones or one of the ones you just custom built, and when you apply that, for example, I want to see just FTP traffic, I can come over, click the filter button, and it'll go through and select those for me, and I could highlight those and then they'd be color-coded for me to see. And of course, I can just clear that out, hit enter, and get everything back to normal. Moving on, we of course have the list of those expert events I told you about. These can be quite handy. I could get away with turning off the lower level ones so I can focus on the higher level events, and I could see things like, hey, there's excessive jitter detected. I can go ahead and select the related packet, which is going to move me or give me the option to jump to the specific packet that that's involved with, or multiple ones if there were. And from there, I could also do my select related by a number of different conditions, maybe by the application, by the source and destination, or by the given flow that that packet belongs to, which would jump me over to the expert view and show me that flow. We'll get to a little bit more of that in a moment. Moving on from the events, one thing I do want to note here is we do have the ability to import events from a file, which is quite handy for security people who are running Snort or Suricata. If they have a capture file that they've run through Snort or Suricata, they can go ahead and add the events from that, and those security events will then appear, and you'll be able to jump to the related packets for that as well. In the notes section throughout, you'll find places where when you're right-clicking, you can add a note to a packet or to a certain selected area. And when you add that note, it will track with the file. So that way, if I go in and select that down and do a save as, well, I can save selected or all of them in a number of different formats. So as long as you pick a format like PCAP-NG or our own format, it will retain those notes, and you could then perhaps put that onto a help desk file, and when somebody else reopens it, they'll see what has been going on that is important to you that you took notes on, and they can always just jump right to that packet and continue the analysis. Now moving on to one of the most powerful areas that I really like to use is the expert views. There's three different ways to look at this. There are very similar data, just different perspectives. One thing is throughout all of them, they have down at the bottom are events. And I could come in and I say, hey, there's RTP late packet arrival. And then when I click on that, it's going to show me where in the list of these client-server communications that is occurring. If I need to know what that is, I can right-click on this, and I have my event settings. Now, the important thing is we have a large list of these. We can change the values of these to change the thresholds at which they alert. I can decide that, hey, I don't consider this to be minor. I consider it to be major, so I can change the event alerting level. If I'm not sure what this alert means, I can always show the info, and this will show me the description of what the event means, the typical cause of that event, and a potential remedy of what can help you resolve that event. And when I'm first playing around with the program in a network, this is one of the things I like to do most, is do some capturing and take a look at what type of events are occurring. Initially sorting by count, and you can sort many of these displays simply by clicking on it. So clicking on it resorts it from lowest to highest and then back again. So in this case, I want to see the most, and it'll show me what my biggest problems are in my network very quickly. And as you can see, when I click on this a little further, it's showing the port communications between client and server and all the related events that occur. I could also look at that from a flow viewpoint, so I can see the end-to-end communication from point A to point B. And I can also take a look at that from an application point of view. So that way, if we're looking at a specific one of these, it would come in and show me where that's at into the application and the IPs that are involved as well. Towards the end of this session, I will go through a kind of a use case example that'll get a little further into this. What I do like to point out is as you select these, the different views are going to provide you quite a wealth of useful information in the details, the event summary, and of course the overall event log. I usually start with event summary, and then as I pick out an individual use case, I take a look at the details to find the information that pertains to that that's helpful. We also do web analytics to help you understand what's going on with your web server environment, and you can just go ahead and pick out any one of those. Once again, you click on these things, and when you select them, it'll give you a wealth of information in the details. You can view the headers of the communication that's going on. If there are any contents in there, like I see we have a GIF file coming through, it'll show you that as well and give you all the related timings in a graph as well. And that can be used from the server perspective. Oops, if I double click, it'll open up the details of client perspective. You can see it on the individual pages, what's going on there. And of course, you can see it as entire request lists. On to the voice and video. This is quite handy. The VoIP engineers really find this to be one of the most useful places in the program, of course, because it gives you that wealth of information. What I really like is right off the bat, when I hover over the given calls, it has a very quick kind of stoplight indicator of the quality of each individual call. I can easily group the low quality calls together just by clicking on the MOS low score. And when I do that, it gets them all grouped. And when I click on one of these and double click it, it's going to show me the ladder diagram, the voice and video flow visualizer that gives me the details of what's going on with that call. And once again, if I wanted to focus in on a particular piece of information, for example, like the jitter, I want the details called out because it's a little hard to read there. I can see that. If I need a better view of those same graphs, we've recently introduced the RTP graph, so you can very clearly see what's going on there. And the way I reached that was double-clicking, which, by the way, when you right-click on one of these items and you see one of the options in bold, that's going to be the action that will be taken when you double-click on it, just like many other Windows programs work. Of course, we do have the ability to play the audio, and that gives you the user perspective, and it'll just pop. And as you can hopefully hear, you can see that the jitter and dropout is clearly audible. Now, that is also able to be saved out as a WAV file, so that way you can store that along in a help desk file if necessary. I first used this feature when I was a new engineer, not familiar with VoIP, and we had just implemented it in a new network rollout. And it's this capability to find the problems quickly, right-click and go to the Event Finder settings and get that show info that really helped me understand that RTP was a real-time protocol and what the cause and remedies were for the problem. And it saves a lot of time from hunting around in Google or some search engine to find a bunch of different things when this is directly related to your traffic. So I do encourage you at the start to play around with these capabilities. And once again, as you select these things, don't neglect taking a look at the details, because that's where it gives you a wealth of detailed information about the call you're looking at. And this was call number 2. If I wanted to, I could go to the media view, and this is the unidirectional view where I can see the one-way side of it, and that way if I wanted to hear just one side of the audio or look at just one side, I can hear and get that experience from that single user point of view. Once again, I can slide this over, take a look at details, and as you can see, quite a wealth of information for the VoIP engineers to work with. Moving on to our additional visuals, we have what we call the peer map that shows you a graphical overview of who's communicating to who. This capture has over 15,000 nodes in it with over 15,000 conversations and 41 protocols. I'm currently looking at it from an IP perspective. Sometimes it's helpful to look at it from a physical or MAC address view, especially if you're dealing with Wi-Fi and that type of thing. You can also look at IP version 6. What I'll point out is over on the configuration, you can see we're looking at a maximum of 100 nodes currently. When I hover over one of these, it gives me the information, but this also shows me just by the thickness of the line where the bulk of the traffic is. If I'd like, I can go ahead and you'll see that some of these nodes automatically get named in a passive manner as traffic's flowing by, but I also can go in and I could do a resolve name feature with the selected node. I could do that up here without selecting any, which would resolve all names. I will caution you that that does do an active DNS lookup, so you will, start generating traffic for that. But, you can pick out individual ones and give them names assigned manually as well by simply inserting in the name table. And this is where you can do something like, my system, and you can give it the color you want, what type of system it is, and whether it's a trusted known system or untrusted. So you could start building kind of a trust view of the network so you can understand at a glance who belongs to your network and who might be visitors or unknown. This is particularly useful when you're dealing with access points and such. I will point out that once you put it in the name table throughout the program, it will be referred to by that name. Now, one of the helpful things that can be done here, I'm going to go ahead and squish this up for a minute. It does give you the protocol views, and sometimes this is very handy at a glance. I can disable all of the current visualizations on that and say, I'm just interested in understanding where my clear text protocols are. So I could highlight FTP and HTTP and at a glance not only see that, of course I have that traffic in there, but who it is that's communicating over those protocols. I can also right-click on that, and once again, I can do that select related packet and pull up, the details of that particular conversation. Now, of course, we do also have under the statistics the different protocols in the list and the different applications that are out there. So if I wanted to know who was doing a particular thing, I could grab it from there, and I'll show you a little bit more of that as we get to it. Now, we also have some good management reports available to us. These are very customizable. You can go in, edit those. You can add, change the color, change the look. From the statistics and summary view, you can add additional fields to these things. Sometimes like the packet size distribution, this can be important to understand performance in your network and the capture capability performance based on the distribution of these things. But you also have a wealth of information in wireless, which unfortunately this example capture doesn't have, but you can also get a wealth of information. I encourage you just to play with through this and see what your reporting capabilities are. And of course, you can save any of these out as a file as well. As you're going through, we do automatically in a saved file, not during a live active capture, but once it's been written to disk, you do have the ability to take a look at the files that we can extract from that data stream. So you can take a look at the information surrounding a given particular file that was transferred over HTTP. This can be very useful for the guys troubleshooting security issues, perhaps, that they can look at the different Java class files in detail, perhaps take a look at the cascading style sheets, look for cross-site scripting, things like that, very quickly and readily, and understand all the information that's involved there without having to do additional work of replaying or capturing it through another method. Onto the statistics portion, we do have a wealth of information in the statistics. During a live capture, you can go through and pause these counts. You can also do a snapshot so you can get a quick side-by-side comparison as time goes by, and you can do that multiple times. A quick right-click and we can take out the snapshots as well. What I tend to do here is you can right-click and collapse all, and then I can go in and really just focus on, hey, I want to know about these particular expert events, and I want to know that I'm, not dropping packets from my capture. I want to know how many, FTP slow server response times, what have you, is there. And on a lot of these, you can right-click on these if you're in one of our associated capture engines or Omni appliances. When you right-click, it'll come up with the ability to make an alert on that as well. So that way you can get active alerting from a capture engine that's out there running all the time, writing the information to disk. And when you see one of those alerts, you would then know you'd be able to go out, do a forensic search, pull up all the details of it without having to wait for an issue to occur again as you do ad hoc troubleshooting. Moving on, you can get a detailed information of the different nodes that are in the environment. You can look at this by IP address, by MAC address, by IP version 6. One of the interesting views is a hierarchy view. What's interesting about this is you can see where you have a MAC address with a number of IP addresses associated with it, which is a quick indicator that you're dealing with a switch or a router. So you can quickly find that type of, whoops, I was on the scroll bar for the selection. You can quickly do a quick scroll through once you select it down here and see that, yeah, this is probably one of my main routers that I'm getting a lot of the information on. And then you can see the individual systems as well. And I will point out, as you collapse things, the associated statistics collapse along with it. And when you expand it out, those associated statistics are expanded out for the individual details. And of course, you have a wealth of ways to adjust the views, filter on it, and so forth. Protocols is a very similar view. Often it's quite handy. Like I said, if you're looking for those plain text protocols, I could sort by that, maybe select these. I'm doing a control and click to do a multiple selection like that. And then I can go ahead and do select related packets. And once again, instead of dealing with the 253,000, I'm down to only 2,000. And I can copy these packets to a new window. And in doing so, what it's going to do is search through the entire caption and give me just the packets related to what I selected. And by the way, here's a tip. I would recommend that whenever you do open up a new tab like that, you immediately rename it. And I usually just change the word selection to whatever I was looking for. So that way I kind of have an idea of what level of analysis I'm at. The nice part is, now that I've narrowed it down to plain text protocols, I can go to the nodes. I'm going to switch it back over to just the IP view, and then I can sort it perhaps by country, and all my private network addresses are going to be grouped together, and that way I know which guys in my environment are the ones that are using a plain text protocol, and then I can follow up with them very quickly. And you know, I can always print out a variety of reports on this as well. So I can go ahead and save this report out, get a full PDF report. By the way, if I were to do a full PDF report on this original workshop file, I believe it comes out to over 900 pages because it includes all the details of all these different analytics. So in this case, you know, finding that needle in the haystack and printing out just a small summary of what you need can be very helpful. I'm going to go ahead and tell that to save out so that way we have that for reference. And as you can see, this is the type of information that is then presented for further use and record keeping. Moving on, we have the different protocol views. Once again, very similar. We have that hierarchical view so you can see how things are broken out. I'm going to go switch it back over to the main workshop one so we have a little more details to work with. That way you can see how the encapsulation is working out, how the different related pieces of information can be grouped together. Or of course you can just go ahead and do it by the flat view. You can sort it out by whatever you need and be able to pick through that way. Double clicking on any of these is going to get to the detailed statistics just like it would on any of the other ones, so you can see in detail what's going on with a given protocol or application or node as we select through. Our applications in this case is, as you see, a little bit of an older file, so we don't have some of the newer things, but I assure you that we are updating this all the time, and as captures are done, you can see you know, the newer web applications and things like that will be identified and updated. You know, we can sort these by categories so that we can understand, well, here's somebody's playing games here. I can once again search through that select related and find that type of information. We've also recently added the countries view, so we can sort that out. If you know you're not supposed to be talking to China, this is a quick way to identify those nodes that are. By once again, you can just select those by related country, by what have you, very easily. And that way you can get a list. This time I'm going to do hide unselected packets. That way I can still stay in the same file, but hide those that are not related to this. And then when I come to the nodes, I can now see who it is. I'm going to go ahead and switch this back over to the IP view of who in my private network is communicating with these. And actually, real quick, I can see it looks like somebody in our network is doing a network scan in China, because I see 222.126, 222.126, 222.126 repeating and coming from here. And a view at the peer map file view also shows me that same information. So very quickly I can see there's unusual behavior. And by the way, once again, I'm only looking at 100 nodes. If I switch this over to even looking at 25%, this becomes very clear that we have a scan going on. And that way I know for a fact that, hey, this system is not doing something it should be doing, and I can quickly address that. That's the quick overview of that part of it. Now, one thing I want to go back to, now that we've gone over those features, is you do have the ability, of course, to do live captures here, not just look at files. And in doing so, you just go ahead and click on the new capture button, and you can get a general listing, and this is where you want to give it a useful title. Practice land capture. And then you have the opportunity of either doing a continuous capture and capture to disk, or leave it off to just do real-time monitoring. Now, we typically operate in one or the other mode, not both at the same time, to make sure we have enough performance capability not to drop any packets. In this case, I know I'm connected to a very slow network, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write out some smaller file sizes. I'm going to go ahead and pick where I want to capture these. I'm just going to go ahead and drop it under here, under my practice LAN captures. And then I'm going to tell it that I want to keep the most recent 5 files, and that'll be round robin. So as it's starting to go through and it starts writing the 6th file, it'll actually get rid of the 1st file and start writing a new 5th file. I can tell it that I want to line it up with every day or every hour of every minute, so as the clock ticks past, it'll automatically start a new file set. I also have the ability to limit the capture packet size. What this is packet slicing. So if I'm capturing potential sensitive data, this is what allows me to slice off the data portion and just view the headers. So I can still have all the information about who's talking to who, what ports are in use, which protocols and applications are in use, but I'll be dropping off any payload that might contain sensitive information like HR documents being passed around, phone calls that I don't want to be hearing, things like that. Now, based on the protocol, the header might be longer or shorter, so you might need to adjust the bytes. I usually can recommend doing a test capture and take a look at what the header sizes are and then cut to the appropriate number of bytes. You can have some limited ability to discard duplicate packets in case you're getting data from a TAP or a SPAN port that is bridging a couple of locations that might send duplicate packets. So this will just check the frame check some information related to the past few packets to make sure there's no duplicates. The buffer size is what gives you a little bit of ability to extend the number of packets that are shown in the live capture view, as well help a little bit buffering that traffic that comes in should you experience a spike. And then, of course, you can show this dialog on a new capture. And then you have the different ways you can get captures in. Now, in this case, I'm going to tell it to use my local area connection, but you'll see I have all my virtual network connections. I have wireless network connections. And my onboard wireless network, just looks plain green. The important part here is it says Omnipeek API no. That means that the wireless card that came on the motherboard with this laptop is not compatible with being put in promiscuous or capture mode. What you're looking for is a little red indicator, and it says Omnipeek API yes, and that means I do have an adapter that actually can sniff wireless traffic. The other options I have, if you have Omnipeek Enterprise, you can get data from an access point by setting up a new capture adapter and saying, hey, I went into my Cisco AP and I set it into promiscuous capture mode and pointed it back to the IP address of this system. And then by setting this up, I'm telling this system, listen for traffic from that point. I also can use multiple capture adapters if I have them to set up a roaming type of capture where I would have, in this case, if I had more than one compatible adapter, and we have recently tested up to 13 of them, I believe, you can come in and say, well, I'm going to listen on channel 1 on the first one, channel 6 on the second one, channel 12 on the last one, and it'll be an aggregate capture of all those channels at once, and you'll be able to see as people in your range roam back and forth across channels. You also have the ability to leverage TCP dump from a remote Linux or Unix server if you have the proper permissions and authentications to be able to log in and issue such a command. You can configure that as a capture point. But as I said, I'm going to do a local area connection. If it were an 802.11, I could tell it what channel I was going to join or scan through it. I can also add key sets so I can join a given encrypted channel and see the data. I will note here we do not support dynamic encryption, so if you had some kind of domain dynamic encryption that changes regularly throughout the course of conversations, we don't support that, unfortunately. But most places are using WPA2 pre-shared keys, and we can certainly join that if necessary. You will find that typically all the information you need for troubleshooting wireless does happen in the headers, which is unencrypted, and you can still work through that. You also have the ability to start and stop captures automatically based on a given trigger. So you would set a trigger event, either perhaps a given time and date, or based on a certain type of traffic that you see based on the filters, whether they're predefined or ones we define. And I will point out that the filters throughout the program are the same, whether they're at capture time or at view time. but then you would go ahead and tell it to start and stop automatically. I used that back, as I said, when I was doing the VoIP new implementation. I had a user that came in hours before I got there, so she reported that 5 minutes within time that she arrived, she'd always have problems. So I just went in and set it to capture, basically just a few minutes before she arrived, and then I went ahead and had it stop a few minutes after. And by having it automatically start and stop those captures when I got in, I had all the data I needed already saved to a file to troubleshoot the problem. You do have access to these filters lists. They're very easy to use. Those that we already have, you can edit those to your own needs, based on a list of applications, protocols we have, or you can even switch to an advanced mode and build quite a few additional specialized things. Like I know I wanted to look for BitTorrent, and let's say this 123 movies. Oops, I added it as an and. It has to be both. That's unlikely, so I'm just going to right-click and swap my and or, and now it'll look for either of those. So that's a very easy way to go through it. Now, I know I'm going through a lot of this stuff quickly, so I encourage you, when you're actually in playing with the program, don't be shy about using the help files. They're very helpful and to the point for what you're dealing with, and it'll give you all the information you need to get through things quickly and easily. And by the way, when you are building filters, I do recommend when you customize it, it's usually best to go ahead and perhaps duplicate a filter, and then you can edit the copy and say, hey, I'm going to do this or 123 movies, and then I can go over to my advanced tab and do that this time properly, application of the 123 movies, and I have it set. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a leader on it of, I don't know, an underscore and my initials, and that way when it comes up on the list, it'll automatically be alphabetized and grouped together, and then I can always create a folder and store them in the folder very easily. Now, you do have the ability to output statistics, and I do recommend this for when you first taking a look at a network. It's a good idea to baseline what you have going on. And so you could put a capture out there just saving statistics at whatever frequency you would like, every 15 minutes, 10 minutes, what have you, and have it write out. In this case, I tend to like to have it write out to a CSV report, so I can then import it into a database or a spreadsheet, and you can have it, reset the statistics after, every time it writes a file, or accumulate them. As I said before, if I were to save out the PDF for like this just 10-minute thing, it's over 900 pages, where doing a CSV makes that a little more flexible to work with. And then most importantly at the end is the analytics that you want to have running during your capture. And one thing I'll point out is I have everything enabled currently, and my capture performance is showing I'm at minimum capture performance. If I know that I'm in a network that I'm not going to have voice and video, for example, I would want to turn that off, and that would improve my capture performance so I don't overrun the capabilities of this system that I have Omnipeek running on. So I'm going to turn off the wireless as well, because I'm not using that, and that'll help out. And that way I have a little bit better chance of running both capture to disk and analysis. So when I click OK now, this is actually going to warn me saying, hey, you're doing a capture to disk and you're doing a monitoring. We don't recommend that. Do one or the other. Or you can say, I know what I'm doing. I'm on a slow network. I'm going to go ahead and continue. And what this will do is open up my capture window, and then I can simply tell it, start capture. And as you see, we start immediately receiving packets, and it'll start building the different views that we have in real time, ticking things by. So this is how you're going to get data into the program. So hopefully that's given you enough to start playing with and understand what's going on with the use of Omnipeek. I'm going to go ahead and, by the way, I encourage you to check the website out. There's a lot of short videos that can give you tips in different areas, and similar videos to like what we're going over today to help extend in different areas, such as if you're more interested in Wi-Fi or if you want to do forensic searching in a capture engine, if you're checking that out. And speaking of that, I would like to show you a little bit of the capabilities. Besides just having Omnipeek that can be running on an individual system, you can install the various software capture engine, which this is opening the capture engine's windows. I currently don't have any listed, but throughout the program there's places where you can save configurations. So I have previously saved out, exported my capture engines. So I'm just going to go in here and find where I've saved them at. Oops, that's under my customization. Bear with me just one second here. Boom. So I'm going to take a look at my most recent ones. There's my capture engines. So when I open that up, All I've done here is I've gone in and have perhaps an Insight unit, one of our small appliances, or one of our data center level Omni appliances, or even a software capture engine, and I can just go in and say insert engine. I give it the IP address, I give it the credentials to access it, and then it shows up here. And with just a quick input of the password, I then have access to that capability for that system to capture data. Now, this, when you first log in, tells you all about the system itself, and in this case, I'm on one of our little Insight units, which is about the form factor of an 8-port home office switch, and it captures sub-gigabit speeds. Now, one of the nice things is I have an individual capture to disk running, potentially. I also have various reporting captures running, because this, in particular, this appliance can do statistical capture, so this is doing one of those analysis captures spread out over the different processors in it, and what it produces is reports, long-term aggregate statistic reports to an ELK dashboard. So you can take those statistics that we were looking at, feed them out to a separate processor, and in this case, this is actually on board the Insight unit itself. And the Omni appliances have this under the hood as well. Should you have enough processor and performance capability left over after the traffic, you can enable these type of things as well. But it gives you a wealth of information, not just in real time or the short term of what's going captured to disk, but since this is aggregate statistics, you know, you can go back quite a bit in time, just limited by the amount of disk space you dedicate to it. And it'll give you a lot of information there. It can give you information about the VoIP calls that have gone on over a long period of time, and just give you yet another way to understand what's going on in your network. In addition to that, one of our newest products called Spotlight leverages more real-time capabilities that we had requests from our end users who have been using our data set appliances and things like that to do, you know, always on captures, much like a DVR would be for your TV. But what they wanted to see was more immediately where issues in their network are occurring. So we developed Spotlight as an add-on or a standalone appliance, and it's designed to capture over 1 million flows per second and focus on where you're getting the worst application latency, the worst network latency, the worst voice over IP quality, and we've also developed a worst TCP IP quality score, which is very similar to the MOS score that VoIP quality uses, but it's just pertaining to TCP IP connections. And as you can see, we're looking at over 1 million flows per second running at over 7 gigabits per second. This has been tested out to about 20 gigabits per second with the associated capture to disk. And one of the things I'll point out is right away we've set alert thresholds, and the red line shows us that one of these in marketing has definitely gone past that threshold and is experiencing application latency. With a click on that, I can immediately see the client and the server involved, the protocol involved, which ports are involved, the time frame, the size going in and out of the network, as well as that horrible network latency. If I click investigate, what it does is it creates a packet bookmark file, which then allows me to go to the associated storage, and it will open up that file and perform what we call a forensic search. So basically, it's coming in like we do on any of our capture engine appliances. It's automatically selecting the time frame, and it's creating a forensic search to pull up the information we need to know, and it's automatically populating the filter with the source, destination, protocol, and ports that are involved, so it's a much more pinpointed, quick search, and then it will pull up in that time frame this same type of related information to what you're looking for. So basically what I'm trying to say here is we have many tools that allow you to get the visibility in every different area of your network you need, ways to go back in time so that way you don't have to watch for a problem to occur, but we can be watching for you, and yet you will still be able to get all this very quick interactive information, as well as being able to drill down to every bit of every packet should you so need. So I think that's the quick whirlwind overview. Matt, do we have any questions that we'd like to address?
Thanks, Chuck. Yeah, we do have a few questions coming in. Normally I would switch back to my slides, but I think a number of these questions are going to require you to stay in Omnipeek, so we'll just stay here. Okay. The first question we have is, do you have any tips on monitoring VM environments? Sure. We actually currently one of the easy ways to do that is to take one of the Windows software engines. So when you were over here, oops,
capture engines. We do have, for example, this one right here is a VM server capture engine, and it looks exactly the same, but it's running in a virtual environment. So it has its captures running out there, and it can see whatever you feed it in that virtual environment. In addition to that, we are shortly coming up with completely virtualized appliances that you'll be able to distribute as a OVA and be able to monitor those virtual environments in much more flexible ways. So I encourage you to keep an eye on the website for that. If you need to get specific information to your use case, because there's so many different ways virtual environments get deployed, whether it's in-house VMware stuff, hybrid cloud, private cloud, public cloud. There's quite a number of different ways to do that. So if you'd like to contact us, we'd be happy to discuss your use case and help you understand what is the best solution for you, both currently and moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. If you would like to contact us, you can go ahead and use the survey at the very end, and the additional comments or questions, you can just ask that there, and we'll reach out to you. The next question that we have is there a way, if you wanted to see what servers were using TLS 1.0, could you differentiate that between TLS 1.1 or TLS 2.0?
That's a very good question. My take on that would be to go to the protocols in a capture. I'm trying to see which one I'm looking at here. Yeah, I'm just looking at a filtered one. Now, by the way, remember I had hidden a bunch of things. So what I want to do is go to my edit and unhide all packets. So Control U is a shortcut for that. But I would go to my protocols and take a look there. You could, of course, start by identifying your server in the nodes list, doing a select related packets on that by source or destination so you get all that traffic, put it out to a new window, and then when that new window comes up, you could check under the protocols in use, and it should differentiate between those different TLS levels. And that'll cover that. By the way, I forgot to actually run through one of the use case examples, so when we're done with the Q&A, I can certainly do that as well.
All right. There's a number of people who have their hands raised. If you can go ahead and just submit the questions to the questions tab, we'll queue those up on our end. But keep the questions coming. They're coming in hot right now. Next question that we have is how do I submit a request for remote captures from an ArrowHive AP?
Well, that is more specific to the ArrowHive configuration, which I don't have one accessible. But for example, I know that in Cisco, when you go to the controller for that AP, and I'm not sure if ArrowHives use controllers, so if they don't, it might be directly on the given AP. But you would go into the configuration for that, and you would be looking for probably where it configures for what channels in that area that it's looking at or set to. You're looking for something that allows it to be set in, it's probably going to be called promiscuous mode, capture mode, or potentially sniffer mode. And then you would give it the parameters that it offers there. So you'd set it into the proper mode, tell it which frequencies to be monitoring, and then for it to come back to Omnipeek, once you have that all configured, and once again I'm going to go to the new capture, you would go to adapter. I'm going to minimize that, go up to access point capture adapter, and remember the critical thing is that you have to have, oops, that was going to start that one, there we go, new capture. My ArrowHive, then you would, on the ArrowHive configuration, point it to the IP address of the system running Omnipeek. Now, of course, you have to make sure you do have IP reachability there. There's no firewalls blocking it. It's route supported and such. Now, you'll notice there's a place in here for IP address. Let's say you had configured 5 ArrowHives, so I'll point back to this system. You could say, I want to specifically listen to this given data coming from one specific ArrowHive, but if you left it blank, you would say, just let me take in all the different ArrowHives at once. So hopefully that gives you enough information. I'm sorry I don't have specific configure information for the ArrowHive itself.
Perfect. The next question we have is can an Insight work with Wi-Fi statistics?
An Insight itself does not have Wi-Fi capabilities. It has no adapter that has driver capabilities, even though you'll see a USB port on it. We don't have drivers for those at this time. We have been receiving requests for that, so we are starting to take a look into whether we can support local Wi-Fi captures off an Insight. But as of now, it's not supported. We're taking a look at different options for that. So if you have a particular use case in mind, please reach out to us and let us know the specifics so we can help determine and prioritize how best to support such a case.
Next question we have is, do you have a Linux-based Omnipeek, or is it just Windows?
Currently, it is Windows only. We have been receiving more and more requests for that. So, we'd be happy if you can feedback even in the chat which company you're with, because we are trying to compile who has that interest and be able to reach out to them to let them know perhaps if we get to a point needing beta testers. I think we may be, and this is speculation on my part, but we may be taking a look at something more platform agnostic and browser-based as opposed to doing another fat client. So we'd be interested in knowing your opinions on that as well.
And that kind of piggybacks into the next question that somebody asked, if we intended to move to a web-based client instead of a client-server platform.
Yes, I think we are beginning that process already. As you had seen, our new Spotlight product, this is entirely web-based interface. The Insight units extend their capabilities further by leveraging ELK, the Elasticsearch ELK stack for the long-term reporting interface. So we are starting to move in that direction. Whether or not that's going to result in the current Windows client being moved over to web or to, multi-platform, I don't know at this stage. We're still looking into what is the best path to take, over 25 years worth of development and migrate it successfully.
Looks like I was on mute there. Sorry about that.
I thought my speakers went out. Thank you.
No, that was me. The next question we have is, what is the difference between a normal capture, monitoring capture, and forensics capture?
You bet. Now, normal capture is not a term we use because everybody tends to do things differently, but the key is the difference tends to be right here, the capture to disk. So when it is capture to disk enabled, we consider that to be a forensics capture if all analysis, and I'm going to right click here and tell it disable all. So what we're doing here is we're focusing purely on taking all of our performance capability and capturing to disk, and we consider that a forensics capture because the idea is you're going to do all your analytics after capture forensically. Now, of course, as it's writing out multiple files, you can look at the older files while capture is still going on quite commonly depending on the resources available on the system. So forensic capture is capture to disk with no monitoring, and the monitoring capture is no capture to disk, just taking a look at whichever analytics you're interested in. We typically do advise just doing one mode or the other, but some testing should be done to determine if, like I gave during the example, you can just turn on the things that are of interest to you, improve your capture performance, and maybe have low enough bandwidth throughput that the system can still handle doing a little bit of both.
The next question kind of, I think, is similar to that last question, but maybe you have a different way of answering this. Is how can you quickly filter out some of the traffic that you'll see in a typical capture?
There's actually a number of ways to do that. One of the first ways I like to do it is in Compass. But throughout the program, you're going to find this filter bar exists here, and you can apply these filters as you're going as necessary. But I really like the Compass because, in fact, I'm going to try to fit in this whirlwind thing of an example. So the example I used to have is people would call into the help desk and they'd say, hey, your network's not responding well, people can't get to my SQL server. So I'd jump over to Compass during an active capture and I would sit here and say, okay, you know what, they're interested in SQL. I'm first going to select that and see if we have overutilization. So right now I have SQL not filtered completely out, but in comparison with the rest of my traffic, and I can see that the traffic's not spiking out. I'm going to, even though I have a little bit of information here, I'm going to turn on the legend so I can see it more clearly. But the nice thing is I can see I don't have a problem there. I'm going to switch over my two-way latency. And here, I'm going to turn off my overall network information and focus on just SQL. So even though I haven't filtered it out at this point, I am focused on just that, and I can quickly see in purple that it's my application latency that's a problem. Now, this is where we get down to actively doing it and doing the select related packets. I now am narrowing down to just about 7,000 out of the 250,000. I'm going to copy those to a new window, and that is the common way to quickly just get down to it. Once again, I'm going to follow my best habit of going ahead and naming this my SQL traffic. And even though it can take me right to packets, my habit is I like looking at flows. I'm going to go to my events, stretch this up so I can see it. Right away, I see I have slow server response time. I can see which ones are involved in that. I can come and pick one out. I can go to my flow visualizer, and I didn't get much in depth in this, but this is really handy to know too, is I can see where I have SQL slow server response time. I can zoom in on this a little bit more by changing the view of it to really see this latency jump out at me. But I'm going to go back down until I find the slow server response time. And the cool part here is I can see packet 728, I'm sending out a SYN packet, and I get an ACK packet back in less than 1/10 of a second. So I know that the server and the network's capable of delivering in a timely fashion, but I don't get data back for over a full second. Whoops. Double-clicked on that by accident. Let me get back here. So the nice part is if the payload is unencrypted, I now know between 728 and 808, if I go to the payload, I can see the queries and responses. I could view on just the server side, or I could view just on the client side, but I'm going to leave them both on. And when I hover over, it tells me what packet I'm at. So I'm going to scroll down until I'm around 728. Hey, there it is. If I triple-click on that, it'll select it. I can then copy this out. And what I really like, this is where that note feature comes in handy. Sent problem query to local SQL admin for local testing. And the nice part about this is here is an exact query that causes a problem on their systems. If they run that locally, it's going to cause problems locally, but at least I can go through and pick a few of those out. I can go in now and save this smaller file. Let me go ahead and close out the packet flow details. I can save this smaller file, and I can save it in a number of formats, but as long as I use one that supports the note format, it will save that out and then attach it to a help desk. Somebody can come in and look at it later. They can pull up the notes. They can click on this to go to the problem packet that's involved. They can also just do a quick right-click and go back to select related flow, and then that way they'll be right back to how I determined there was a problem. By the way, one thing I didn't show is when we're taking a look at the flow visualizer, there's a number of other useful pieces of information. So always take a look for tabs and such. So I can see, different graphs real quick. I can, in fact, I'm going to hold down Shift and select this so I get all of them. I can see the over time critical detailed information, and the help file will tell you really quick what all these are useful for. I have a what if, which is great if I'm taking a baseline of an area, like let's say, hey, my QA team is going to be having more simultaneous users. How's that going to impact traffic if instead of 1, I have 5? And it'll do those calculations for me. So I can do a little predictive load information, and you can do that with, if I change the latency because I moved a server somewhere else, if I have more client processing time, more packets per transaction, all those things you can do. What's really handy is you can also do a quick comparison of 2 different captures. So if I have, capture engine or a capture from, a server happening at one point and Omnipeek at another, I might have my LAN side here, but I'm going to open up, let's say I do a Wi-Fi capture as well. Sorry to sidetrack a little bit. I definitely wanted to get in a couple of these examples. So if I open up this wireless one, here's a flow somebody's complaining about. If I go to my flow visualizer and I go to that compare tab, on one side I have my wireless, and on the other I can select from the open files the LAN side. And at a glance, it can immediately tell me where I'm missing packets, and I can see that my problem resides on the WAN side of things. So there's a lot of power here, and that doesn't even get into touching on the full multi-segment analysis, which is similar, but over multiple capture points at once. Sorry about that little extended side trip, but I hope it did answer your question.
Thank you, Chuck. We are a little bit over our time limit here. What I would suggest is some of the folks that are on and have a lot of questions, we are having this session again later on today at 4 o'clock Pacific time. You can always jump on, if you can register for that webinar, you can always jump on for the last 15 minutes or so and ask further questions there. We have a lot of questions that we haven't gotten to yet. I think we'll address maybe one more, and then the rest I will share with Chuck, and hopefully we can get you back and answer as quick as possible. But to wrap this up, just one question, and I think this is a relatively easy one for you to answer, is this user has version 10.0 of Omnipeek, and they're wondering if they upgrade, do they upgrade the Omnipeek clients and the Omni engine, or is it just the client?
This is a very important question. If you do have Omni capture engines, including the appliances, it is always a good idea to update both. But ideally, it does require the client, the Omnipeek Enterprise or Pro, to be at least the same major revision or higher to connect to and utilize any capture engine or Omni appliances. So what I usually recommend is update your Omnipeek first, then go ahead and update your capture engines or appliances, so that way everybody's on the same level, you have all the same features available, and things will be able to connect. If for some reason you grab a copy of Omnipeek, you're trying to connect to one of your capture engines and things aren't connecting or not looking right, the odds are the capture engine's on a newer version than Omnipeek, so then you just go ahead and update your Omnipeek.
Thanks, Chuck. And again, if you have the opportunity later today to register for that webinar and ask additional questions there, feel free. We have a survey that will pop up the minute that you exit out of this webinar. You can ask additional questions there, and then for the ones that have been submitted here, I'll go ahead and get those over to Chuck, and we'll respond directly back to you with an answer. Chuck, thanks for your time, and thank you for everybody who attended today's webinar, and have a great day.